otherwise known as William the Conqueror, the first Norman king. Here he is. Now this is a picture taken from the Bayeux Tapestry. Let's find out a bit about him. So as you can see in this app, we have all the portraits of the different kings and queens going along the top. And as I pull them along, you can see the royal line of succession moves along at the same time. We are going to start with William I. There he is. And his successor, William II. So William the Conqueror. Let's read more. Sir William lived from circa 1027, and he died on the 9th of September 1087. He reigned from the 14th of October 1066 to the 9th of September, when he died, obviously, 1087. William sailed over the Channel, that's the English Channel, to take the throne of England. At the Battle of Hastings he proved himself worthy of the name Conqueror. Better than that, he went on to prove he could do more than just conquer a country, but that he could organise it too, and did so with the epic Domesday Book. William the Conqueror may have been a foreigner to England, but he became one of the most best-known English kings of all time, and the ancestor of all the kings and queens to follow, right up to our present-day Queen, Elizabeth II. William claimed that Edward the Confessor had promised the crown of England to him, and as such he marched, sailed right over from France to claim it. Whether he was telling the truth about Edward's promise, we'll never know, because after his victory over Harold II at the famous Battle of Hastings, he became king. He was crowned king at Westminster Abbey on Christmas Day in 1066. A ruthless but efficient ruler, William was the man behind the Domesday Book, a record of every person, piece of land and farm animal in the country. He spent much of his reign defending England and Normandy against other invaders and his own rebellious eldest son, Robert II, Curthose, Duke of Normandy, and died after a riding accident sustained while fighting the French in Mons. Military might. Probably the most famous battle ever fought on English soil, the Battle of Hastings on the 14th of October 1066, saw William I and his 15,000 Norman troops clash with the Anglo-Saxon army of Harold II, made up of just 5,000 men. When the two armies met, the English used a shield wall tactic to defend against the Normans. However, when some of the Normans turned to run, they drew English soldiers after them, breaking the shield wall. The Normans were able to turn and overwhelm Harold's soldiers with their larger force. The Bayeux Tapestry was embroidered to tell the story of the battle, and seemingly shows Harold falling Here's another picture of him. William II lived circa 1056 to the 2nd of August 1100. He reigned from the 9th of September 1087 to the 2nd of August 1100. The Red King, William Rufus, was the favourite son of William the Conqueror. His fancy fashions and terrible temper won him no fans, although as a ruler and general he was regarded as being just and chivalrous. His reign was cut short when someone accidentally shot him while he was out hunting. You can see in this picture the arrow through his chest. William II was the third son of William the Conqueror. His eldest brother, Robert II, Curthose, Duke of Normandy, was a bit too rebellious for their father, and his second eldest brother, Richard, got himself killed while hunting in the New Forest. And then it says, you'll notice that this happens a lot. So upon the death of William the Conqueror, the crown fell to another William, known as Rufus, or the Red King, possibly because of his red hair or ruddy face. Outspoken William II was never particularly popular. He offended the church by spending its money on himself and exiling its archbishop when the two men disagreed. He offended almost everyone else with his swearing and the scandalous nature of his court, where flowing hair and extravagant dress, not to mention outrageously pointy shoes, were all the fashion. William II invaded Normandy twice, while his brother Robert was supposedly ruling there. In the end, Robert sold Normandy to William II to pay for his place on the First Crusade. It was in William II's reign, therefore, that Normandy first became part of England. Awkward end. William II was out hunting in the New Forest on the 2nd of August 1100 when he saw a stag and began to chase it, followed by his knights. He fired an arrow but missed the stag and called upon his knight, Walter Tyrrell, to shoot. Tyrrell did shoot the king. This was supposedly an accident, but given that the king's brother and heir, Henry, was amongst the party and apparently rode straight off to Winchester to present himself as the new king, the whole business seems mysterious, to say the least. Okay, so then we have Henry I. Here he is. Or Pope result at the age of 67. Next we have Stephen. He lived circa 1096 to the 25th of October 1154, and he reigned from the 1st of December 1135 to the 25th of October 1154. Stephen seized the throne from his cousin Matilda before she even had the chance to get to it, plunging England into civil war. The war wore Stephen down. After 12 long years, he agreed to let Matilda's son Henry become his heir, and Henry didn't have long to wait to get his hands on the crown. Stephen was a grandson of William the Conqueror, and although he had promised his uncle, Henry I, to help his cousin Matilda become queen, as soon as the old king died, Stephen took the throne for himself. He claimed that Henry had changed his mind on his deathbed and had chosen his beloved nephew Stephen over Henry's daughter Matilda. Cheating his cousin obviously wasn't a very noble thing to do, but many of the people at court were relieved not to have a woman in charge. Matilda, however, was less pleased, and almost as soon as Stephen became king, the country was plunged into civil war, with the Scots fighting the English in the north, and Matilda and her supporters taking over most of the southwest of England. Stephen was captured by Matilda and only released when his followers captured Matilda's half-brother, and Matilda agreed to swap prisoners. Stephen didn't exactly win the war, age of 16, took the supposedly untakeable fortress of Talaborg when he was just 22, and went on to become a hero of the Crusades. As a young man, he was also involved in rebellions against his father, Henry II, supported by his forceful mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and in league with King Philip of France. Richard grew up in Aquitaine and was probably his mother's favourite son, but like his older brother, Henry, the young king, he just didn't get on with his father. When Henry II died, it was said that his nose bled in Richard's presence, a sure sign that Richard was responsible for his death. Richard did come to England for his coronation at Westminster Abbey, but immediately afterwards started his preparations for the Third Crusade. This was a fight against the Muslim forces of Saladin, who were controlling the city of Jerusalem. On his way to the Crusades, Richard married Berengaria, daughter of the King of Navarre. Things started well for Richard and the other Christian leaders of the Third Crusade, but before long they were all squabbling amongst themselves. In the end, neither side was making any real progress, so the Crusaders were forced to make a truce with Saladin. By this time, Richard was anxious to get home, as he knew the King of France and his own baby brother John were plotting against him. But luck had turned against Richard, and on his way home, his ship was wrecked. Forced to travel across land, Richard entered the territory of Duke Leopold of Austria. Duke Leopold wasn't Richard's biggest fan, as Richard had been rude to him while they were all fighting in the Holy Land, so he had him captured and thrown into prison. Richard was stuck in prison for 15 months. When he was finally released, he quickly returned to England, where he found his younger brother John had been spending all the royal money and planning to take the throne. Richard didn't have much time to hang about in England, however, as his overseas lands were once again under threat. He had to cross the Channel yet again. While fighting in Limousin, France, in 1199, Richard was hit in the shoulder by an arrow. He pretended it was nothing and kept fighting for another couple of days. But then the wound started to fester. In the end, it wasn't the arrow, but the infection which killed Lionheart. Richard was buried at Fontevraud Abbey, beside his father, although the heart of the lion was taken out and buried separately at Rouen. When Richard I was imprisoned by Duke Leopold of Austria, no one knew where he was. According to legend, one of his most faithful minstrels, named Blondel, wandered across Europe singing a song that he and the king had composed together. After months of wandering and singing, Blondel eventually passed under Richard's window and heard the king's voice as he joined in with the song. He had discovered the location of the Lionheart. And next we have John the Lankland. John lived between the 24th of December 1166 and the 19th of October 1216. He reigned from the 6th of April 1199 to the 19th of October 1216. A bit of a disaster as a king, John annoyed his barons so much that they made him sign an agreement called Magna Carta, or the Great Charter, protecting the rights of the people against the wishes of the king and changing the course of English history. disaster as a king. The barons eventually got so annoyed that in 1215 they drew up a long document called Magna Carta, setting out all the rights of Englishmen and the duties of the king. John wasn't totally happy about this, as it restricted many of his powers as king, but the barons forced him to sign it. When John became king, he wasn't technically first in line to the throne. This should have been his nephew Arthur, who was the son of John's elder brother Geoffrey, but Arthur was just a little boy, and Richard chose John to succeed him. When Arthur reached his teens, however, he started getting hungry for the throne. He imprisoned his grandmother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, in order to start a war with John. John wasn't so useless that he couldn't beat a 15-year-old boy. He captured Arthur and had him murdered. John was impatient and not at all sensible. When travelling from Norfolk to Lincolnshire with all of his servants and royal possessions, he ordered his party to cross the Wash without checking the tide first. The tide came in and swept away all John's treasures. The crown jewels were lost to the sea forever. And next we have Henry III. Here he is. He lived from the 1st of October 1207 to the 16th of November 1272, and he reigned from the 19th of October 1216 to the 16th of November 1872. Henry was just 9 years old when his father, John, died and left him the throne. He was his father's son, in other words, not the greatest of kings. The barons, always easily annoyed, went so far as to organise a rebellion and capture Henry. However, Henry had a son, Edward, who was a rather more successful leader and who saved his father, allowing Henry to get back on the throne, where he stayed until the end of his days. Luckily, Henry III had some good advisers who kept the young king and the country on the straight and narrow until Henry was old enough to rule on his own. Unfortunately, it turned out Henry wasn't very good at ruling on his own, just like his father. He managed to really annoy the barons all over again, and was forced into an agreement called the Provisions of Oxford, which said